Hello again. Now it's the next day. Nah, it's the same day. So, now for a long story out of Conversations with Pioneer Men. So, let's see. Trying to find one that's not horribly long. That's a good one. So, yeah, get your ear. Barnett Simpson, pioneer of 1846, Portland, Oregon. So, let's see. I'm not figuring on getting married or running for office. So I might as well tell you the exact truth about my age and anything else you care to ask me about. I was born in Platte County, Missouri, December 29th, 1836, and was the youngest child of a family of 11. So, as not to give a one-sided picture, I'm going to tell you the things that are not credible about myself, as well as the things that are. For example, I might tell you my most vivid recollection of our trip across the plains in 1846. I was going on 10 when we crossed the plains to the Willamette Valley. We crossed the river at St. Joe and camped for a few days to let the immigrants gather and to organize the wagon train. My oldest sister, Eleanor, married a man named John Anderson. Her son, John, was a year and a half older than I. In spite of the fact that I was his uncle, my father told me to look up a bridle that had been mislaid. So John and I started to look for it. While looking under one of the wagons, John saw a stone jug. He pulled out the cork and smelled it and said, "This is whiskey. Did you ever drink any corn liquor, Barnett?" My father was a primitive Baptist preacher and was very strict, so I had never tasted liquor. I confessed that I had never drunk any whiskey and was curious as to its taste. John tipped at the jug and took a swallow and handed it to me. I didn't like to be a quitter, so I took a swallow. It nearly strangled me, but I pronounced it mighty good. John thought it would be funny if he could get me drunk, so he suggested that we drink some more. We took a generous drink and then resumed our search for the bridle. We found the jug in the middle of the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock we had pretty much finished that whiskey that had been in there. We went back every few minutes to take another drink, so John would tip the jug up and pretend to take a big drink and would pass it to me and urge me to drink heartily. By 5 o'clock, I couldn't walk. I fell in a stupor. John had drunk enough to make him drowsy. He sat by the campfire. He had a new hunting coat my sister had made him. A spark jumped out on the tail of his new hunting coat, and he was so fuddled he didn't notice until someone saw the smoke, and by that time the whole back of his coat had burned off. They saw he was drunk, and they knew I had been with him, so they began to look for me. Presently they found me lying where I had fallen. They carried me to our wagon and worked over me all night. I foamed at the mouth and had convulsions, and they thought I was going to die. The first thing I remember was along about 9 o'clock the next morning. I heard my brother Thomas, who was not going to cross the plains with us, telling Mother goodbye and saying, "Don't worry, Mother. Barnett is going to pull through all right. Give him a tablespoon of whiskey every couple of hours till he sobers up." I rolled over towards him and said, "I've had plenty. I don't want any more. As long as I live, never another drop of whiskey will ever go down my throat." That was nearly 80 years ago, and from that day to this, I have never tasted liquor of any kind or description. My father, William Simpson, was born in North Carolina. My mother, whose maiden name was Mary Kimsey, was born in Tennessee. I don't remember what year my father and mother were married, but Ben was their first child, and he was born in Tennessee in 1818, when my mother was 21. My mother was born in 1797, and my father in 1793. Father was 53 when he started across the plains, and mother was 49. They were considered old people. They called father Uncle Billy and mother Aunt Polly. My brother Ben, who was 28 when we started for Oregon, was elected captain of the wagon train. Ben married Elizara Jane Wisdom in 1839 when he was 21. They had one son, John T. Simpson. She died not long after her baby was born. My brother married Nancy Cooper in 1843 when they crossed the plains in 1846 to Ben and, married Nancy Cooper in 1843. When we crossed the plains in 1846 to Ben's, his second wife, two more boys had been born, Sylvester C. and Samuel L. Sam was a baby, having been born about 6 months before we started for Oregon. Sam, my nephew, was the author of the book of poems entitled The Gold-Gated West. I guess his beautiful Willamette was his best known. Our whole family came to Oregon in 1846, except my brother Thomas, who did not cross the plains till 1852. Tom married Rosina Buff back in Missouri and decided to let us come out and see if we liked it. And if we did, he would sell out and come. When we started across the plains, all of our neighbors told Mother what a dangerous trip it was and how we were sure to be killed by Indians, or drowned, or die of cholera, or be run over by the buffaloes. Mother, who had heard how they buried people who had died crossing the plains in a blanket by the side of the road, decided that she would be forehanded. So the winter before she left, she carded and spun and wove a lot of cloth, dyed it and cut it up, and made a shroud apiece for everyone in the family. No, we didn't get to use a single one of them. I think she cut them up after we got to Oregon and made clothes out of them. I was more interested in the hunting shirt that she made me than I was in my shroud. It will be 80 years ago next spring that we started out with our ox team and covered wagons for Oregon. We didn't have any particular trouble on our 6-month trip across the plains. My brother Ben was captain of the train, and he was the right man in the right place. The only fatality he had was one man killed. Two men went in together to come to Oregon. They pooled their resources, bought a wagon, a couple of yoke of oxen, and supplies for the trip. They didn't get along any too well. One night the driver of the outfit lagged behind. They camped about 3 miles from the rest of the train. The next day the driver caught up with us. When they asked him where his partner was, he said, "The Indians must have killed him during the night. I buried him this morning by the side of the road." We had not had any trouble with the Indians, so most of the folk in the train thought he had killed his partner for his share of the outfit. No, we didn't do anything about it. There was nothing we could do. We were in a hurry to press to Oregon, and even if we had turned back and dug his partner up, we couldn't have proved that there wasn't some prowling Indian who hadn't shot him. So we went on. But the man whose partner had been wiped out so mysteriously wasn't very popular with the rest of the folks in the wagon train. The last man to join our train before we pulled out for the long trip westward from the rendezvous across from Sir Joe was Uncle Ben Munkers. The train rarely had the same number of wagons in the 2 days together. It averted about 100 wagons. Averaged. It's kind of faded out right here in this print for some reason. It averaged about 100 wagons. Sometimes some of the party would straggle and drop back with another train, or hurry up and get ahead, later dropping back to join us. Lots of the folks crossing the plains imagined the train ahead or the train back of the one they were in must have more considerate and congenial people in it. They usually found out they were mistaken. When they dropped back or forged ahead to join the other train, some folks always have good neighbors. Others always complain about having bad neighbors. I guess it is the people themselves more than the neighbors that are at fault. One incident of our trip that I greatly enjoyed was having a band of several hundreds of Indians draw up across the road and refuse to let us go on unless we would pay for passing through their country. They were nearly naked and all painted up. They danced and whooped and scared the women and the little children half to death. My brother Ben gave the word for every man to be able to bear arms and get his gun and march towards the Indians ready to shoot if they made any hostile move. They gave way and let us through, for they saw our men meant business. The chief, who spoke some English, said, "You scare all our game away. Won't each man give us a present of a charge of powder apiece to prove you are our friends?" My brother told the men to pour out enough powder from their horns for a charge for each of the Indians. While they were doing this, an antelope ran by. Half a dozen of the Indians leapt on their horses and took off after it. They dropped it within 100 yards. They shot it with arrows. Most of the band were armed with bows, though some had guns. Did we have any fights on the plains? I saw only one. A woman claimed that another woman in the train was trying to vamp her husband. The lady who was doing the vamping had very abundant and beautiful hair. So the wife of the man, who was more or less willing to be vamped, sailed into her. It was a lively fight while it lasted. They pulled hair, scratched, yelled, and cried and fought like a couple of cats. The lady with the beautiful hair had a lot less of it when the fight was declared a draw. We had to stop one day to let a herd of buffaloes go by along the I guess it's plateau. It's not plateau. It's capitalized, so the plate. That's what it is. 2 miles before they came to us, they could hear a subdued roar, like the sound of the surf at Newport. They fairly shook the ground. They were thousands of them. They ran along, paying no attention to our wagon train, though our oxen were mighty restless at the smell and the sound of the sight of them. Excuse me. All I need to do today, nearly 80 years later, is to shut my eyes. And I can see the vast empty plains with their rolling land waves. I can see the wagons coming to a stop. See the children pile out of the wagon while the men folk unyoke the oxen and all the women scatter as soon as the train comes to a stop to gather their aprons full of sun-dried buffalo chips to cook the coffee and bacon. What did we eat for supper? Bread cooked in a Dutch oven, or cornbread with coffee, bacon, beans, dried peaches and apples. We had some cows along, so we usually had milk. Sometimes we had buffalo or antelope meat in place of bacon. Sometimes the women folk rustled sagebrush or willow wood in place of buffalo chips, but the chips made a quick hot fire and proved very satisfactory. I told you we saw only one fight while crossing the plains. Well, I'll stick to that statement, but there was a lot of fights I was in. But I was too busy fighting to stop and be an eyewitness of them. The Burnett boy was a year older than a primitive Baptist preacher. Sorry, I skipped over. Burnett boy was a year older than I, but I was a mite larger. My father being A primitive Baptist preacher had taught me to turn the other cheek. My mother had also impressed upon me that boys who expect to be gentlemen don't settle their differences with their fists. The Burnett boy found he could lick me so hardly a day went by that he didn't make my life a burden. I could hardly call my soul my own. He generally caught me where my folks wouldn't see us fighting. I put up a half-hearted fight, usually trying to avoid punishment more than to try and hurt him. One day, my mother saw him licking me. That's fighting, of course, like winning, in case anybody doesn't know. She pulled him off me and said to me, "The time has come for you to take your own part. I want you to thrash this boy and do a thorough job." I could hardly believe my ears. I hesitated. She said, "You can take your choice. Either you whip this bully within an inch of his life, or I'll give you a worse licking than he ever gave you." I knew my mother was a woman of her word, so I waded in, and what I did to that boy was plenty. After that, all I had to do was double my fists and scowl at him, and he would beat it. One of the things I remember very distinctly is our stopping in the Independence Rock. The men and women gathered around the rock and read the names of the immigrants who had registered during the preceding 2 or 3 years. Then they scratched their own names in the rock. Some of the men painted their names on with tar from the tar buckets that hung on the back of the axles of the wagon. I doubt if there are many left of those who wrote their names on Independence Rock 79 years ago. There are a few of us left, but when I call the roll of my former campmates who crossed the plains, oh, this is going on forever, with me in 1846, not many of them are here to answer the roll call. I'm going to stop there and finish this story in the next video because this is taking a long time and I'm really tired tonight and still have some things to do. That was actually a lot of fun. Comment below for me if you want me to continue with reading these books to you after VEDFAM. Because, I mean, I will be making still videos now and then to talk, or now I'm actually more than likely to show the area around places that we will be going to if it snows, you know, usual stuff. But if you want me to read some more of the books, let me know. I really, really would like to know, because I don't want to keep on reading these if people aren't watching or it bores you. You know, I don't want to make boring videos. Who wants to see boring videos? There's a ton of them out there. You know, I mean, I'm not one of those clever ones that clicks on and off and does all the fancy editing, but, you know, I still enjoy talking to you. So until tomorrow, which this will be seen on I guess the 30th. So until tomorrow, which will be New Year's Eve, I hope you guys had a great day and will have a really good evening. And I will see you then.